Today I'm going to take this 24 gauge copper sheet and this 16 gauge Argentium silver wire and turn them into textured earrings. The first step for this project is to decide what shape I want to use for the earrings. I have a whole bunch of these templates. This happens to be from a company calling them Great Shapes templates. These are actually designed to make cabochons, in other words, cut stone. But I like to use them also for earring shapes. Some of them are too big, some of them are too small. But I usually find one that I like. The one I'm going to work with today is, I think I'm going to go with this larger, kind of an odd shape. So I'm going to go with that. And the first step of what I need to do is I need to cut out the shapes from the copper sheet. I'm going to make 2 pairs of earrings, so I need 4 in this shape. And then when I go to use them, even though I'll make them all the same, facing the same way, I can always flop them over to have them facing each other. So I start off by I'm going to basically run them up the side of this. I try to minimize the amount of waste I have on sheets. So I'm going to line it up as close to the edge of the copper as I can. And by the way, that crunching noise you might hear is my dogs. They're chewing on bones to keep them quiet. So I take a Sharpie, a fine point Sharpie, and I just draw around on the inside of where the shape that I want. And I need 4 of these because I'm making 2 pairs of earrings. And again, I could flip them over if I want, but I don't need to do that because the copper is the same on both sides. So I could flip it over after I cut them out. Oh, they're going to make little growly noises too. That's the treat for you today. Okay, I'll do this real quick. And then one more. Well, it just fits. I wasn't sure if I was going to use this size or the slightly smaller one, but I decided to go bold. This is 24 gauge copper, which is really not that heavy. So now I'm all done with that, and there's 2 ways that I could cut these shapes out. One way is to use a jeweler's saw, and I happen to have a jeweler's saw, being that I make jewelry. And I've got one of these here, which is a really nice jeweler's saw by New Concepts, K-N-E-W. But the other way to do it is to use French shear or some other scissor-like cutting device. And I happen to have 2 options for that. I have this French shear. This will cut through metal up to, I'm thinking 20 gauge in thickness. This thing always pops out. It's kind of annoying. And then the other one is a Joyce Chin kitchen scissor, which I highly recommend. I'm kind of trying to save this. I figure when this thing dies, I'll start using this more. So the way I use this is I just basically cut it out like it's paper. Of course, it's not paper. The thing you want to remember is that when you're cutting metal, there are a lot of sharp edges. And although I don't expect anything to go flying, eye protection is a really good idea. You could hear the noise of it cutting, and it doesn't have to be perfect. It's a little hard to get on the edges sometimes. Sometimes you need to come in from another angle. I don't know if you can see what I'm doing here. But I'm cutting around this one to cut this one out. And once I've got it cut out, then I can go around and round off the edge here. And I like to cut pretty much on the outside of the line or on the line. The line is not really super thin. You could also, if you did not want to use a pen for this, you could also use, I forgot what the name of it's called, it's a pointy thing. And it will kind of scratch the line into your metal. And that makes a really fine line. All right, so this one is done. Okay, it's got a long way to go before it's earrings, but that's the first shape. I'll do the rest of them off camera. Okay, I'm on the last one now. A couple things I wanted to point out while I was cutting this. First of all, a lot of times it's easier if you cut a strip of metal off of the sheet before you start cutting these. It's just easier to work with. I wound up just cutting them all off. And then the other thing I wanted to point out is that this design that I'm doing today, I've never done before, so it might actually fail. And depending on how spectacularly it fails, this video might not ever be seen. If it fails just a little, then you'll probably see the fail. And if it doesn't fail at all, hooray, it'll be a good thing. So my goal when I'm cutting metal is always to minimize waste. This is a really pointy, sharp end here. I'm just gonna get rid of that. Okay. And then I save all of the scraps. When I really don't know what to do with the copper. I have nothing to do with it yet. Maybe I will someday. But I do save it all in my scrap thing. And then, of course, I save the silver, because the silver, if I don't use it, I can send it back to get a refund, which is really good because silver tends to be expensive. So that's all put away. Here's the shapes. Couple of things I want to do. I want to flatten these out, and then I want to polish the edges or sand the edges so that there's no sharp edges, including the point. This little point at the end is a little bit sharp. It's too sharp for jewelry, so I would need to sand that down. So let me get the stuff out for that, and we'll get to work on that. Okay, so the first thing I want to do is I want to flatten these pieces out. It's 24 gauge, so it's pretty thin. And using the shears to cut it introduces all kinds of bends to it. So I've got here a little bench block and a rubber base that'll help deaden the sound. And I've got a rawhide mallet. Unfortunately, mine's not nearly as worked in as it should be, but it should do the job. And all I need to do is just hold it down and very gently tap it with the mallet to flatten it out. Do it on both sides. It seems to need an extra around the edges here. And that's pretty good. And I'll do that for each one. That's pretty good. So the next thing I want to do is I want to smooth out the edges so there's no sharp edges or points. And I do that with usually with sandpaper. There's a whole bunch of different kinds of materials you can use. A lot of people like to use sanding sticks, which is sandpaper attached to like a paint stick. I don't like using those because the sound of sandpaper gives me kind of like the heebie-jeebies, like nails on a chalkboard. And I find that it's a lot less when I use something like one of these 3M blocks. It's a sanding block. Or this thing here, which is the company's Hermes. And this is like a sanding paper of 100 grit sandpaper. And I really prefer using the block. And what I'll do is I'll just basically rub the metal on that. And what that does is it just takes away the sharpness. Got to remember to roll it all the way over. This block is pretty beat up right now, so. It's also easier when you've got a flat edge as opposed to a curve. Like the curve on the top here is going to be harder to get than those flat edges. Now the bottom is flat. I'm going to make these with this at the bottom. And I've got this point, and I want to get rid of that point. Now the point might require a file. Let's see if I can do it without the file. This one's okay. It's this one that's going to be a pain. The trouble with points is that they tend to make holes in these blocks. Or basically gouge them. That's not bad at all. Now this would work the same way. I find that this doesn't last quite as long as the 3M blocks, so I probably won't be buying these anymore. That feels pretty good. While you're doing this, you can also use the sanding to, if you didn't cut it very well, or you want to smooth it out or change the shape, you can also use the sanding material for that. What I really do like to use, because I am a motor person, is I've got a flex shaft and I've got this little sanding wheel where the sandpaper, as it's used, you can just tear it away. So you can see there's a ton of sandpaper on here. It's already spooled up onto this thing, and all I need to do is get it into my flex shaft. Whoops. Which I will try to do without sticking my head in the picture. A little bit further in. There we go. Okay, nice and tight. And then I can hit the foot pedal. Get into position. And it'll spin, and then I could just take the next one and I could run it along the edge. If you do use this, just keep in mind a couple things. First of all, it's likely to kick up some dust, which you don't want to breathe, so a face mask or respirator is a good idea. And then the second thing is, if you let this thing rest in any one spot while you're doing it, it will sand an indentation in it. So you got to use it wisely. It's really hard on the curved areas, but it should help a lot with this point. Yeah, that's good. And I always rub my fingers along the piece to see if it's been sanded enough. Should not be any sharp pieces on your jewelry. Okay, that one's done. Let me just look at this one again. Nope, that's good too. All right, and I'll just go through and do the rest. I am of the mindset that you should, if you could do something with a motorized tool, you should do it, because it makes it, usually does it faster, less frustration. It's not always the perfect way to go, depends on what you're doing. But if you have some success, go for it. And what I'm seeing on this piece is when I cut it, I made kind of a lump in it. So I'm going to try to use the sanding block to get rid of that lump, because I want it to be more flat on that side. I just didn't cut it very well. That's a little bit better. Okay. So now the edges are finished and they're ready for the next step. And that's going to be to put some texture on it. Okay, the way I'm going to add texture to these earrings is I'm going to use some wire and get lines from the wire into the metal, and I'm going to do that with my rolling mill. The wire that I'm using here is stainless steel binding wire. This happens to be 24 gauge. You could probably use anything up to 20 gauge in thickness. I don't think I'd go any smaller than 24 though. Whatever wire you use needs to be harder wire than the metal you're putting the grooves into. So this is stainless steel, and that's harder than copper. So I should be good. I already cut off a piece of it, so I didn't have to fumble with it on camera. So what I want to do is I want to basically create lines down each of the earrings, and you notice that I did flip one of them over so that they're going to be mirror images of each other. And they don't have to be exact, they don't have to be perfect in that respect, but that's how I want to do them. So what I'm going to do is I've got a piece of a manila cardstock, manila folder basically cut up, little scraps that I had, and I'm just going to start by tracing the outline of the earrings. And again, this doesn't need to be perfect. It's not like I'm going to cut it out or anything. It's just a guide for me. Then I can move those aside. Give it some space here. Whoops. And Doesn't matter what you do it with. Okay, and the way I want the lines to be is I want a long line down here, and then a shorter line next to it, and another line next to that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to straighten out this wire as best I can, and I'm going to cut 3 pieces that are, oh, I don't know, a couple of inches long. I'm going to start with them all the same length. Make sure that's long enough. It is. I want to make sure I have enough to overhang the earring from the top. Oops. Fumble, fumble. Okay. And here's this next one. Again, they don't have to be perfect. Okay. So now I'll do this one first. I want a long one here, almost to the bottom. I want a slightly shorter one next to it. And of course I don't have to cut them the length that I want because I'm going to tape them at the top. And that is my dog barking probably at one of the garage cats. Now, depending on how straight you make the wires is how straight this is going to be. And I like an organic look, so it's going to not be perfectly straight. I do want to move that down a little bit, which is going to be a little difficult. Let's try these pliers. Got those big fingers going on there. Whoops. There's that one. And then this one. I don't want them going off. I don't want the lines to continue beyond the earring bottom. I want them to start at the top. And once I get these into place, I can actually bend them a little bit more. So that's going to be the way they are at the top. I got some masking tape here. Just going to rip off a piece. I'm going to tape it at the top so they don't move. And then I can fiddle around with the straightness if I want. This works a lot better if you don't have arthritis in your fingers. Just pointing that out. Okay, well, that's still a little bit off. I want this to be in. Okay, so what's going to happen, I'll do the other one as well. I won't make you watch me. But what's going to happen then is I'm going to put it through the rolling mill. I'll do them one at a time. With the metal stuck under here, I'll have to hold that in place. Make sure the wire's on top. And then those wires will be imprinted onto the metal. So I'll do these one at a time. I'll do this one first. Let me get the camera set up at the rolling mill. Okay, this is my rolling mill. And I've got my metal right here. I don't want to tilt it too much. And I see right away I made a big mistake. I should have cut the paper so it fits in the rolling mill. My rolling mill's only got a 4-inch mouth on it, so this cardboard's not going to fit. There you go. Problem solved. Okay, so what I want to do is make sure that it's all even, and then you say, well, you keep moving that metal around, why don't you just tape the metal down? I don't want to tape the metal down because the texture of the tape will go onto the metal, and that's not what I want. So what I need to do, other than make my dog stop whining, is I need to wind this closed a little bit better. A lot better. Try to remember what I put through here last. Oh, that might be too much. Let's see. It should be snug, but not too snug. This looks like it might do it. Now, as I put this through, I want to put my thumb on the unsecured end and try to control where those pieces of metal go. And I could tell already this is not tight enough, so let me tighten it a tiny bit more. Okay, let's try it again. I'm gonna bring it through. No, it's still not tight enough, and now it doesn't want to tighten, so hold on a second. Got the paper. Trick is when it's not secured, you really have to hold on to it. So okay, let's try it one more time. Okay, I'm winding in the tape and the tops of the wires, not the metal yet. I'm going to try to hold it with my thumb. There's a certain part where I have to remove my thumb. Okay, it's going through. One of my wires is deciding it wants to jump off, so I'm holding it back on. Now I think I've got it too tight. Let's see how this comes out. All right. Well, let's see what we did here. Okay. Couple of things. Oh dear. Ha ha ha. Talk about failures. Let's take a look at this. Let me get the camera pointed the right way. We'll look at it. Okay, this is an example of a dismal failure. I had the rolling mill too tight, and what it did is as it brought the metal through, it basically crushed the copper and reshaped it. And then also one of those wires literally cut through the copper. This one is stuck on the copper. I'm going to peel it off. I have to use this thing here. So what did I learn from this? I learned that I should test the rolling mill off camera. But this is what I wanted, was a line like that. I don't know what happened to the third wire. So this was the first wire, the short one, the longer one, and then the other one apparently got slid off. So I'm going to redo this from scratch. Good thing I made all those earrings. Also notice on this side here, this was the side that was against the paper, the cardboard, and it got a texture from that cardboard. You might think, oh, paper, what kind of texture does that have? It actually has a texture. So that's part of what's gonna go on with that. So I'm going to, off camera, I'm going to redo this and get it all ready to go, and then we'll get back to the rolling mill after I've adjusted it, and we'll do it right. Stay tuned. Okay, I adjusted the rolling mill to make sure that I get the line that I want without too much deformation of the metal. I sacrificed half a pair of earrings since I already lost half a pair. These guys don't really match anymore. All right. So anyway, I'm ready to give it a roll. Let's give it a shot again. Okay, take two. And once again, I have to cut this because I made it wide instead of narrow. Okay. Let me also cut off the extra tape at the top so it doesn't get fouled up in the rolling mill. There we go. Okay, so I've got my metal underneath the 3 lines of wire. I'm putting it into the rolling mill. I've already tested the rolling mill, holding it down with my thumb so it doesn't travel, and I'm going to roll it through. And it's rolling a lot easier. And make sure I hold it as long as I can and move my thumb, which wouldn't fit into the rolling mill anyway. And this is what I get. And of course there's going to be a curve to the metal afterwards. That's natural. So what I want to do is I want to do the same thing with the other piece in the other direction in the rolling mill. And the good thing about it is I don't have to adjust the rolling mill again. I'm going to use fresh wire, fresh piece of cardboard. Everything's going to be fresh. I keep the settings exactly the same, and this will automatically be the same depth. So I'll do that next, off camera. Okay, I just pulled the second one out of the rolling mill, and I'll pull the metal out from underneath. And you can see that they are not badly matched. This one here is a little close to the edge. But again, handmade stuff, it shouldn't be perfect. It should be, the idea of it should be the same, but not necessarily the pieces. Okay, a few things I want to mention about this. If you wanted the lines to go straight through all the way, then you could use extra wire and tape it at the other side and then just slide this underneath. Then you don't have to worry about the wires moving, but the lines will go straight through. I wanted the lines to end here because I want to put little balls at the end of them, little balls of silver. And the other thing I wanted to point out is, again, this is a prototype. I've never actually made these, although I've made something similar in silver. I'm making something different today. I want to see if I can make it in copper. And the other thing is when you're starting out making designs for the very first time, I highly recommend you do them in copper. Here's an experiment to make sure I get it right the second time. This is my first try that I pretty much toasted. I've wasted this. If this was silver, yeah, I could recycle it. I might be able to use it for something else. but it's not as likely, and it costs a lot more. And obviously, if it was gold, I don't even want to talk about gold. Too expensive. So this is what I've got now, and I flatten them down a little bit with my fingers. And the next thing we're going to do is add the silver balls. There'll be a silver ball at the bottom of each one. So let me get set up for that. So the silver balls I'm going to put at the bottom of each of these lines were made from Argentium silver. And I'm not going to make those in this video. If I get enough requests and comments, I will do a video about how to make the silver balls. But I already have some made, so I'm going to use those. And I'll just pour some out in my hand so you get an idea of what they look like. These are Argentium silver balls, and they're done by melting them. And they're all different sizes because it really depends on the size of the metal you start with. So if you're really good at cutting uniform pieces of wire, you can get them all the same size. Otherwise, you get a variety of sizes, and that's okay because when you have a variety of sizes, you can use different sizes for different things. So I only need 6 of the balls from here. There's a lot more than 6 in there, but I'm all set and I could pick out the ones that I like best. In order to fuse them onto this, though, I got to do one more thing first, and that is to get this super, super clean. So what I'll be doing off camera is I've got some Bartender's Friend. It's a scouring thing, usually for scouring stainless steel sinks and things like that. And I've got a toothbrush, and I will be brushing these really, really well to get any kind of finger grease off of them or anything that's going to prevent the metal from sticking to it. So I'll do that off camera, and I'll come back and I'll be wearing gloves to work with these, or at least one glove anyway. The key is to keep finger oils or anything, any dirt off of these for the next step. Okay, I've washed all these, both of these, and scrubbed them. I just want to also point out, nice and clean. I'm handling them with gloves now so I don't get any finger oils on them. I do want to point out that the back does look different from the front. It's a very subtle difference, but on the front, the wire pushes in. On the back, it kind of pushes out, and then the parts of the wire that touch the manila paper have a kind of a texture to them. I'm not sure if you could see that. It's very subtle. Again, I've straightened these out pretty much after getting curled in the rolling mill. And now I'm going to be using my Never Get Hot, Never Get Ruined super pointy tweezers to position these onto the pieces I'm going to fuse them on. So these are going to fuse. This should work, by the way, even though I'm using Argentium silver, this should work with sterling. I just happen to have the Argentium balls already made, so that's what I'm using. So in order to get these to stick, the first thing I want to do is I want to spray some Flux Fire Coat Preventative on top of the different metal, the copper. And that's going to kind of protect it from getting too much fire scale on it. And then the next thing I want to do is hopefully there'll be enough of that fluid on there. And I'm going to use my tweezers to place the balls on. I'm picking a nice big one here. And because of that fluid on there being wet, they should stay where I put them. They're kind of getting like glue. Put this big one here. And I'm just pulling them out with my tweezers, placing them at the end, because that's where I want them. I could put them anywhere on this piece. I could scatter them all over if I want, but what I want is to have them on the ends of those little lines. Oh, I knew one of them would give me trouble. Boop. A little closer, right there. And hopefully that's good, and hopefully they won't move. I'm going to try doing this with my little Dremel butane torch. I have a more powerful torch if this one doesn't come up to the temperature that I need. What I want to do now is I want to get these things kind of shiny, the balls, and hopefully they will fuse onto the copper. So let's give this a go. Sounded like it was going to start. There it is. Okay, here we go. I'll start with this one first. So I'm just going to heat the metal, kind of dry out the flux. I don't think that this torch has enough fluid in it, but we'll see. I swear I just refilled it. Nope, definitely looks wimpy. Okay, I'm gonna pull out the other torch and dial that one down. The other one I've got is a Big Shot, and the reason I'm very careful about using this is that this sucker will melt metal really easily. And sometimes you just don't want it to melt that quickly. It's a lot hotter than the Dremel, especially today. Okay, here we go. Oh yeah, now we're talking. Okay, I'm just gonna do it from a little bit of a distance away. Flux is dry. I've got my pick in one hand. I'm waiting for these little metal balls to look like they're fusing. There we go. And I'll do the same thing here. That one's trying to get away. Hold on. Oh, it went right back where it was supposed to be. Now it jumped off. Okay, hold on. They're so close together that I'd like to get them at the same time. Let's try one more time to get this on here. What's happened is that when the flux dried, it kind of lost its glue effect. So there is another way to do this. May as well show you that now. I can take a little bit of flux and put it down on my pad here to make like a puddle. Of course it's absorbing, which is not what I want. Bear with me. This is the lid for my, for those little balls. And I can grab this little ball, get some flux on it, put it where I want it to go, and with luck, it'll stay there. Okay, round two. All right, let me get the other ones, and I'll come back for that one. I gotta be really careful with this torch because once it starts to melt, it goes. There we go. I don't know if you saw that it got shiny. Let's try this one more time. Of course, now it's stuck to the side here. Oh, really? Really is stuck. That's not what I want at all. I really don't want to ruin those tweezers. There we go. And once again, I'll dip it in here. I think the problem is that it's so close to the edge that it just doesn't want to stay there. Let's try that. Not exactly where I want it, but hopefully it'll roll where I want it. Okay, and once again. And I want to try to get just that one ball because I don't want the other ones to melt any more than they are. And that's it. Okay, now I test them by hitting them with the pick. This one here looks like it's barely melted on. These two are melted really good. And now I'm going to throw them in, I'm going to quench them and throw them in a pickle. So I'll do that off camera. Okay, I've taken the earrings out of the pickle pot and rinsed them off, dried them off. I'm seeing, I'm not sure if you could see this, there's sort of a stain on here, probably from the flux. I'm not sure if keeping it in the pickle pot longer would get rid of that, but I know that when I polish it in a later step, that'll go away. So I'm gonna leave it like that for now. It's on both of them. The fused on dots came out pretty good. Couple of things to note here. On this particular one here, this is the first one I did. I let it go a little bit too long, a little bit too much heat, and it started to melt and the silver started to go up the little groove. I'm not sure if that's good or bad. Not what I wanted, but I don't think it's gonna really, I don't think it ruins the piece at all. Then on this one, these two fused nicely. A little bit of run on this one. This one is attached pretty firmly. It's not exactly at the end of the groove where I wanted it to be, so it's not exactly right. Again, first time making these, and this is, it's organic, so if it doesn't come out exactly the way you expect, this is handmade stuff. So what I want to do now is I want to very gently with the domed side of my hammer bang down on these to flatten them out so they look more like discs than circles. And that's really going to change the look of like this giant one here and this one. And it'll also, if this one's not fused on well enough, it will fall off. So let's experiment. We'll do the other one first. So I'm going to be very gently, I'm holding it down with one finger, not very close so I don't bang my finger, and I'm just going to hit that. You see how it's flat now on the top? It has a whole different look to it. And I'll do the same thing on the other two. I'm actually kind of doing them at the same time because they're so close together. And there we go. I said earlier that you could do this with sterling silver, and I have to take that back. I'm not sure if you can do this with sterling. Again, this is Argentium. I know that you can do it with 18 karat gold. I would not waste gold on copper, that's for sure. I would do that on either sterling silver or Argentium silver, do the gold on it. Again, gold is so darn expensive that I just can't see using it in my work. Nobody's gonna really want to pay for it. I'll do this one now. So of course, the bigger the dot was, the more rounded you'll get. Now this one here, cross your fingers. Nope, it seems to be fused nicely. There we go. Oh, let's see a little more. And I think I'll get this one a little more. And that's the exact look I was going for. And at this point, there are a couple more steps we need to do with it. But one of the things I want to do now, before I do anything else, is I do want to put in the holes at the top for the ear wire to go into. And I'll do that with a punch. Again, there are two ways you can do it. You can drill it, or you can punch it. And this is, again, 24 gauge sheet. So this punch, which is, I'm using a 1.25 millimeter punch. I should have no trouble getting in there. Let's make sure I get it where I want it to be, though. Kind of in the middle there. Some people will mark where they want their hole to go and then punch on the mark. I'm more of a wing it person. There we go. And you can see the punch there. Let's put a little bit of a curve into it. I'll fix that in a second. I should also point out that when I did that melting, I also annealed the copper. So the copper is super soft now. And let's see. The lines really throw you when you do this. There we go. And I'm just going to, I think I'll use my mallet. This is 2 tiny pieces of copper I punched out. Sometimes it's good to get it from both sides. Okay. And that's where we are so far. So the next step is going to be to polish out this sort of texture that's on there that I really don't like. And I'm going to do that on my polishing wheel. Actually, I'll do that with my flex shaft so I don't have to move the camera. Lazy bones. Let me set that up. Okay, I've put a 1 micron radial wheel. It's a 3-ply on my flex shaft. And I'll grab the first piece. And a lot of times what I'll do when I'm working with polishing is I'll do the back first just to make sure I'm not screwing it up. So let's do that. it's coming out nice and shiny. Okay, so I haven't scratched the back. It shouldn't with a 1 micron, but you want to make sure. And now I'll do the front. And the metal does get hot. Some people like to use a bench pin to hold it down. I prefer to hold it. What's nice about the radial is it will get into those lines and it will get into the grooves around the dots. So that looks pretty darn good to me. And I will do the other one off camera. Okay, the next thing I want to do with these before I finish them up is I want to put a little bit of a dome to them so that they are domed out. And I'm going to use this curving block here with this dapping punch. Fits into this last one here. That's the widest. And I'm going to very gently, hopefully, bang this down with my hammer to get a little bit of a curve into it. And I will have to reposition that because the piece of metal is too long for this piece, for this groove. Now I don't want to give it too much because then I will, first of all, I could scratch the front, which I don't want to do. And second of all, I don't want to get rid of these grooves. So I want to do it very, very gently. And I'm almost done. I just got to do the end now. And these are where the little dots are. And that's the way that looks. I think I want a little bit more curved, a little bit more on top. There we go. It's not bad. It looks like I got a little, maybe a little scratched, but I think that it'll be okay after the next step. And I'll do the same thing for this one. One thing you want to remember with these is these grooves have to be really clean, because if there's any grit in there or dust or whatever, it could get embedded into your metal, which is not probably what you want. In all honesty, wood would probably be better than metal for this, what I'm doing now. I do not have a wooden one of these. Let's see how that looks compared to the other one. I think it looks pretty good. Not perfect, but pretty good. I think I'm going to give him another quick polish with that 1 micron. Just run it through here real quick, see if it fixes it up a little bit. Back, I don't really care about on that. Okay, great. Next step is going to be to throw it in some liver of sulfur, which will blacken it up. And from there, I will put it into some tumbling medium. So let me get that going. Okay, this nasty stuff here is some liver of sulfur that I have pre-mixed I usually use it until it doesn't work anymore, and then I dump it, and by that time it's neutral. I neutralize with baking soda, dump it, and then make a fresh batch. What I find that is when I'm working with copper, I do not need to heat this. It will make it black pretty quick. When I'm working with silver, I should heat it. Otherwise I'll be waiting a long time. Now this has silver on it, and in all honesty, I really don't want the silver to get black. So if it gets a little black, that's fine. It'll come out in the polishing, with the polishing medium. What I've done here is I've taken a piece of copper wire. I usually reuse wire over and over, but I can't find my piece. So it's just a piece of spare copper wire. And I've run the wire through the two earrings so that they are facing opposite directions. I don't want them nestled in because then they won't get evenly spread. And then with them together, I just dump them in and swirl them around a little bit. Now, if this was hot, it would work faster. You can see how it's turning it kind of dirty copper color, but I want it pretty much black. So it's going to take a little more dipping. If this was hot, it would just immediately turn black. This is actually kind of a neat color here. I really hate to touch this stuff. It's got kind of different hues of different shades. Actually, it's kind of cool. I think I'm gonna let it go like that. So I'm going to neutralize that in some baking soda and water. This is something else I keep pre-mixed in my shop. And then basically, when I'm done with this, I pour this into this, it neutralizes it, and I start fresh with everything. I like to make earrings, when I make earrings, I like to make more than one pair at a time. Today I was going to make two until I had my mishap. Okay, so that's the way they look. They actually look pretty cool, but we're not done yet. Next step is to put it in the tumbler, and that's going to work harden the copper, which if you recall, it has been softened, annealed because of the heat. And it will also, it'll also do some cool things with this color. So we'll do that next. Okay, this is my tumbler. It's a Lortone knockoff, which I do not recommend. If you're going to buy a small tumbler, I recommend the Lortone. This is a knockoff. It's got pretty much the same barrel. In fact, it fits on my tumbler, but the barrel is kind of cheesy. It's got a super cheesy lid, and I just don't recommend it. So anyway, I've got in here my tumbling media, and into that I'm going to put a couple of drops of Dawn. Just a couple little drops. That's enough. You can see it there. And I'm going to put some water. This is just tap water. Bring it up to a little bit, I don't know, an inch above the medium. And I'm going to drop these in. And I normally, again, I like to make multiple earrings at the same time. So I'd be tumbling a bunch of them. You don't have to just do a pair at a time. Then I'm going to put the cheesy lid on, if I can do it without bending it. It's got a nice seal when you get it in there, but the trick is getting it in there without bending it. Oh yeah, I think I should just swap it out and start using the other tumbler and use this one for the metal shot. Okay, that's on, and then this goes on top of that, and this goes on top of that. Again, it seals just like a Lortone, but it's not. And I want to make that nice and tight so it doesn't leak. Okay, and I give it a little bit of a tumble around. And I'm going to go put this on my tumbler, and I'm going to let it run for 15 minutes and then come back with it. Well, the tumbler's all done. I've dumped all the medium, including the earrings, into a strainer. But before we do that, I just do want to point out that it is wine time here at the studio. And this evening I'm drinking a local wine, Malaga Springs Winery, which is literally a half a mile down the road from me. And one of my favorite wineries to visit. If you're ever in the area, Wenatchee, Malaga, I hope you come and visit. So that said, I'm pushing local wines. Here are the two finished pieces. Let me get this thing out of the way. It's kind of wet. And I want to dry these off. Interesting rough pattern on them. I like it. it's not uniform. There's kind of like lines to it. I don't know if you could even see that. I suspect that's got to do with the way I used the radial wheel the last time I polished it. Just before I put them in the liver of sulfur, if you recall, I took the 1 micron radial on my flex shaft, and I ran it, instead of running it up and down this way, I ran it this way. And as I was doing it, I was thinking about it and wonder if that's going to be a problem. And I don't say it's a problem, but it certainly did put an interesting texture to it. So these earrings are done. Here's the back, front. I don't know if you'd wear them this way, on either side, or whatever. The very last step, let me get rid of this towel here. The very last step is to add the ear wires. These are copper earrings. I usually use hypoallergenic niobium ear wires with this. Because they're silver though, and the silver does look silver, you might want to use silver ear wires with these. But I'm going to go with the copper ones. And to put those on, you open up the back of the ear wire, glass is on there, and you do that with a twisting motion. Make sure I'm still in the camera here. Twisting motion, put them on, put one on, that is, and close it up. Okay. And that looks, I think, kind of nice. I think it would look better, actually, if there was a silver ball up there. I'd have to make my own ear wires, though, and I don't work with niobium wire. I actually buy the ear wires already made. Copper ear wires aren't going to cut it. I've tried that, and I had this allergic reaction, and I figure if I'm going to have an allergic reaction, other people will, too. So that's that, and do the same thing on this one. And now, normally, I would put them onto a card, so I could put them on display, but I do need to photograph these first, put them on my Etsy site. Hopefully I will make more of these in the near future and have them on as well. I like to make earrings in batches. Making one pair at a time is really not a good use of my time, but being able to show you how with these videos is, I think, pretty rewarding. It gives you an idea of what it takes. I just want to review some of the equipment that I used for this. I'll just go over the big stuff. A rolling mill is a major thing. Some metal cutting shears, not a big deal, but I mean, that's one of the things that I used. I used my flex shaft a few times with a couple of different wheels on it. I had a full-blown soldering station, and I used parts of that. I also used a tumbler with special tumbling medium that I use. So those are some of the things. Also dapping, not really a dapping block because it's more like a curve, with the punch and hammers, various hammers. Those are other things. A bench block. So there's a lot of tools and equipment and know-how that go into this. The idea of doing these comes from a class that I took in Tucson this year. That particular class made Argentium earrings, full Argentium, with the Argentium dots, and also some Argentium dust, and also 18 karat gold dust and 18 karat gold dots. And I wanted to make a version of it that would be more mainstream, less costly for the buyer. And I also wanted to see if I could get that Argentium to fuse onto copper, and sure enough, I did. So that's these earrings. I hope you enjoyed this project. Stay tuned if you like what you see. Comment on it. If you don't like what you see, don't come back. I don't, whatever. You could tell me what I could do better if you think there's something I can do better. But if you're just going to be a hater, just, hate somewhere else. I'm trying to make this approachable. It's not my goal to teach you how to make jewelry. It's my goal to show you how I make jewelry. And there is a distinction between those two things. And I hope you enjoy it. Thanks very much for tuning in. Take care. Bye.